You're muted.
Mic on. There we go. That's a little better. First order of business is the roll call. Myra, could you please take the roll?
Hoogheim.
Present.
Beloga.
Here.
Lewis.
Here.
Olson.
Here.
Thorson. All commissioners are present. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 2, approval of the agenda. Are there any questions or additions to the agenda? Hearing none, do I hear a motion to approve the agenda for the August 10th, 2021 meeting?
So moved. Second.
For a second? It's moved by Commissioner Beloga, seconded by Commissioner Thorson. Would you please take the roll call vote? Myra?
Beloga.
Aye.
Hoogheim.
Aye.
Lewis.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Thorson. Motion passed 5-0.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 3, approval of the minutes of July 27th, 2021. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, do I hear a motion to approve the minutes of July 27th, 2021?
Commissioner Olson moves that we approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
Commissioner Hukim seconds.
Thank you. Motion by Commissioner Olson, second by Commissioner Hukim. May we have the roll call vote, please?
Hoogheim.
Aye.
Beloga. Thank you. Lewis.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Thorson.
Thank you.
Motion passed 4-0.
Moving on to number 4, organizational business. Is there any organizational business this evening? Seeing
No.
none, I'm going to move on to new business, item 5.1, Second Amendment to the 2019 CDBG Action Plan. May we have the staff report, please?
Thank you, Erica Coleman, HRA Administrator. This is the Second Amendment to the 2019 CDBG Action Plan, and this amendment is for the use of CDBG CV, so Community Development Block Grant Coronavirus Funding. And so we are just bringing before you the information so that you know how we have recommended spending these funds with the community for activities. Myra, can you scroll down to the information, please? It's a presentation. The presentation. Yep. Next slide. All right, so this is additional funding available through the CARES Act. And so it's used to prevent or prepare for the spread of COVID-19 and respond and facilitate assistance due to impacts of the pandemic. The First Amendment was brought before the HRA Board and the City Council in May of 2020 to use the additional coronavirus funds of $269,466 for VEAP for rental housing assistance. And now we are at the Second Amendment. And because it is the CARES Act funding, that is why it's to the 2019 CDBG Action Plan. And so there's an additional $515,447 that we would like to allocate. And at this time, we do not expect to get additional funding under the CARES Act. Next slide. So how staff is recommending allocation of funding is emergency rental assistance to VEAP in the amount of $200,000. Foreclosure prevention services and mortgage assistance to the Minnesota Homeownership Center for $194,447. Homelessness outreach and response services to St. Stephen's Human Services House of Charity for $50,000. That is one organization they combined. They just haven't rolled out the new name, but that's one organization, not two. Next slide. Housing assistance navigation to community mediation and restorative services for $35,000. This is actually a collaboration of 15 organizations with a couple that actually reside in Bloomington that have a culturally specific focus included in their services. And they were actually put together through an RFP to Hennepin County. Hennepin County had asked them to combine as one organization that does multiple services within the realm of housing in particular. And so that's why it's Community Mediation Restorative Services. And then administration, this is administration dollars for staff and the HRA. So this is not something that goes out in a contract. It's received internally for the work that is done. And there were no administration dollars taken from the CDBG CV grant allocation prior. And that would be in the amount of $36,000. So we did hold a public hearing with the City Council on August 2nd. We did not receive any comments. The City Council did approve the recommendation, and now we will look to submit to HUD for review and approval of the recommendation to use funds in this manner. I can stand for any questions.
Thank you. I'll get it. Are there any questions for Administrator Coleman? Hearing none, do I hear a motion to approve the substantial amendment to the 2019 CDBG Action Plan to add $515,447 in CARES Act funding and related activities? Is there a motion?
Commissioner Hukim moves to approve.
Is there a second?
Commissioner Olson, second.
Thank you. It has been moved by Commissioner Hukim, seconded by Commissioner Olson, to approve the substantial amendment to the 2019 CDBG Action Plan. Is there any discussion? Yes, Commissioner.
I always wonder why HRA is ratifying council's action.
That's a good question.
Thank you, Chair Lewis, Commissioner Beloga. That actually was on my part of taking it to the council first. Normally, the process is to take it to the HRA board to seek feedback and approval. And then the HRA board, the HRA actually has a contract with the city. And so the allocation comes to the city of Bloomington. And so it is the city council that actually does the approval of the submission to HUD. But because we have a contract as the HRA for the administration of CDBG dollars, it comes to the HRA board for that fact.
Thank you. Does that answer your question? Thank you.
And I know that it is.
That's okay. All right. Are there any other questions for Administrator Coleman? Hearing none, I will take a call for the vote on the motion to approve the substantial amendment to the 2019 CDBG Action Plan. Myra, could you do the roll call vote, please?
Beloga.
Aye.
Hukim.
Aye.
Lewis.
Aye.
Olson. Thorson. Motion passed 5-0.
Thank you. Moving on to item 5.2, removal of 10117 First Avenue South from active lots for sale list. May we have the staff report, please?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, Brian Hartman, HRA Program Manager. I have an item before you regarding the lot that the HRA owns at 10117 First Avenue South. As I'm sure you all remember, last year we bought this property with a very substandard house on it, and that was removed and over the summertime, early fall. And then last fall, we came to you asking to set a sale price for this lot at the assessing department determined value of $120,000. Since that time, we've had several inquiries about it, but nothing too serious. A couple of developers had inquired about maybe doing a double on this lot. couple of people doing single families, but never a hard offer of any kind, just some inquiries over that period of time. So given kind of the discussion that we've been having about the lot we have on Park Avenue, we thought it might be a good time for us to take a pause with this lot as well and explore what our options might be. Maybe we can pursue maybe a different type of development on this property that might provide a affordable home ownership opportunity rather than just doing a market rate sale. So we don't have anything in our pocket that we're planning on at the moment, but we would like to take some time and explore some options. We've had some preliminary options. I don't know, it's up to Erica to see if she wants to share anything about that, but some very, very preliminary discussions with some developers about maybe some different options that we would bring back to you for discussion and approval. So at this time, we're looking for a motion to approve the removal of the HRA-owned lot from the active sale list on our webpage.
Thank you, Mr. Hartman. Are there any questions for Mr. Hartman? Yes, Commissioner Thorson.
Is this a sign of how these lots might be handled in the future in terms of not posting them for the general public at first? Or are you seeing this as just this particular lot or just looking at how else something might play out, but no decisions on how we handle future lots?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Thorson, I think it's the latter. I think it's because of the amount of time this is spent on the market for sale in a very hot housing market that maybe it's an opportunity to maybe look to do something different. I think each lot is kind of individual in its uniqueness as far as what it presents as far as development opportunity. I mean, if we have something that we get the chance to acquire in a very attractive neighborhood that might command a very high price, I think then that would just make sense to sell it outright. So I think it's an individual choice that the HRA will be making.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes,
Chair-
Commissioner Olson.
Chair Lewis, thank you. I think this is a good way to handle this situation. I appreciate the fact that staff initiated the consideration of pulling it off the market and then actually doing so in keeping with discussions that we've had before. And that is, I think, encouraging that we have two, actually, I believe now then, that we are discussing for alternative ways for development. And in a hot house market, there are those who flip, and that's their right to do so. But I think it's also important that we, as a government agency, make an effort to give, I don't know how to describe it, but in essence, a fair chance to people who are wanting to get into housing for the first time, or at least a lower rental if rental property is built on such sites. So, and it's a good move, I think. So.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Hartman? Hearing none, do we have a motion to approve the removal of the HRA-owned lot at 10117 First Avenue South from the active for sale list?
Commissioner Olson offers that amendment to approve the removal of the HRA-owned lot.
Not an amendment, just
Or,
motion to remove is all.
oh, okay, the motion as you stated it.
All right, thank you. Is there a second?
Commissioner Hukim seconds.
Thank you. It has been moved by Commissioner Olson, seconded by Commissioner Hukim, to approve the removal of the HRA-owned lot at 10117 First Avenue South from the active for sale list. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, Myra, could you take the roll call vote, please?
Beloga.
Aye.
Hughim.
Aye.
Lewis.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Thorson.
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0.
Thank you. Moving on to our discussion items, item 6.1, update on American Rescue Plan Act funding request. May we have the staff report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Erica Coleman, HRA Administrator. So I just wanted to come forward with information about the American Rescue Plan Act funding request. And so a little bit of background information. The city of Bloomington has been allocated $11.4 million through Federal American Rescue Plan Act, better known as ARP or ARPA. You'll hear that a lot. It's going to be allocated in 2 tranches. The first being May of 2021, the city received half, and then May 2022, the city would receive the additional half. It does come with U.S. Treasury Department parameters for use. So that has been taken into consideration, and then funding needs to be expended by December 31st, 2024. So city leadership and city council consider category request, and so it was first discussed in June with the city council, and then modified recommendations in line with federal requirements were discussed at the city council in July of this year. And so the modified recommendations include infrastructure, $7.8 million, public health and public safety, $1.7 million, funds to community, $1.25 million, and other priorities, $650,000. The HRA falls under funds to community. And so in funds to community, the funding is dedicated towards initiatives that will benefit community, and community development would be allocated $500,000 for Neighborhood Development Center, which is to focus on small and BIPOC businesses in Bloomington. And the Bloomington Convention and Visitors Bureau, $250,000, which has already been allocated. The HRA would be $250,000 for homelessness response and prevention services, and $250,000 for down payment housing assistance program. Homelessness response and prevention services will be used to assist people who are assisting housing instability and homelessness and are in need of services for coordination, resources, organization, eviction help, and temporary housing. Specialized internal staff that coordinates homelessness response with Hennepin County Human Services and Office to End Homelessness and community organizations would be used. Prevention services are those involving community organizations, city programs such as our Tenant Protection Ordinance, 4D program, and NOAA, and additional needs and coordination. In addition, these funds can be used to conduct a needs assessment on the development of a permanent shelter to be operated with local nonprofit partners in Bloomington. The down payment assistance program will grant up to $10,500 per qualifying household at or below 80% area median income, and administration costs for nonprofit administrators to do the intake, income, and eligibility qualifications, as well as disperse assistance funds at homebuyer closing. With this amount of $250,000, up to 21 loans could be provided, and it would allow for an additional funding resources to boost the goal of increasing homeownership, which is not only an HRA, but a city council strategic priority. I will stand for any questions, as this is a discussion item.
Madam Chair? No questions, just a comment, and Erica has heard this one already. My hope is that the down payment assistance program can be a self-rejuvenating program similar to the fix-up program that we have, so that the funds are lent out and recovered at the time of sale and continue to revolve, supplemented by additional funding by City Council.
Thank you.
Commissioner Beloga. Actually, with the thought process around the funding and based on commissioner feedback, it would be a 0% interest loan that is in a subordinate position to the most senior lien, that is due at time of sale, refinance, transfer of title, or when the property ceases to be occupied as the principal residence of the borrower.
The key element that I had is the latter one, that additional funding should be made available. $250,000 is a good start.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner Beloga. I had just one really quick question myself, and it was just if if the allocation of the money changes, will we know about it at the board? Will you come back to let us know?
Yes, I would come back to let
Okay.
you know. So I put a request in. Thank you, Chair Lewis, sorry. So I put a request in to the Community Development Director, which went up to the executive leadership team, and they all discussed it and looked at the parameters and came back with the request, the amounts.
Okay.
So if the amounts change, I should be notified in order to come back to the HRA board.
Just to let us know. Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions for Administrator Coleman? Hearing none, I will move on to our next item of business, which is item 6.2, the Just Deeds Project. May we have your report, Administrator Coleman?
Yes, thank you. I thought I would put it in a presentation to make it a little bit easier because it's a lot of information. So we'll go to the next slide. And so just a little bit of history in terms of historical wealth building exclusions as it ties into housing. The Homestead Act of 1862 gave white settlers indigenous land, 160 acres if for 5 continuous years they built a residence and grew crops, and then they filed for the deed of the property with an $18 fee. America's largest financial asset, slavery, transferred wealth to individuals and organizations, even educational institutions. And until the 13th Amendment in 1865, slavery legally prevented blacks from building wealth. In 1935, nope, you can go back to the first slide. Sorry. On top of preventing from building wealth, until the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Jim Crow laws continued segregation in the South. They detailed what jobs blacks could take and how much they could be paid. They restricted blacks' lives and traveled. They restricted where blacks lived and traveled. In 1935, the Social Security Act excluded farm workers and domestic workers from accruing benefits. At that time, most blacks still lived in the U.S. South, where they were more likely to be farm workers and domestic workers. As a result, 2/3 of blacks never received Social Security's wealth building opportunities. 1.2 million African American vets served in World War II, over 500,000 Latinos, including 350,000 Mexican Americans and 53,000 Puerto Ricans, served in World War II. The GI Bill of Rights assisted veterans with housing, education, and jobs, but it was left to the states to administer. As a result, black veterans in the South were denied access, but it continued throughout the North as Bloomington boomed as a post-World War II city. From 1940 to 1960, the city's population increased to 9 times the population at the turn of the century. During the 1940s, the city's development vision was low cost, low density housing, each with its own well and septic system. The rapid growth in population was part due to the post-World War II boom and subsequent birth of the baby boomer generation. We're still on the first slide, Myra. It's okay. In 1968, the Fair Housing Act ended legal discrimination in renting and selling homes. That was the time that Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, and the passage helped curb civil unrest. Despite these laws, discrimination against blacks owning wealth has continued, such as welfare programs that restricted the amount of wealth one could have. The Indian Appropriations Act of 1871 created the reservation system. The government forces Native peoples to move to and live on reservations where it can better subdue them. Native people find themselves severely restricted in their ability to hunt, fish, and gather their traditional foods. Bloomington had Iowa, Dakota, Sioux, Ojibwe, and Chippewa before settlers. Shakopee Sioux community was established by Congress in 1886, which is where a lot of the natives from Bloomington moved to. Next slide. Historical milestones. So after all of that history, there are many milestones to follow it up. In 1940, the NAACP launched a sustained legal campaign against covenants. In 1948, the Supreme Court rules covenants are unenforceable. In 1953, Minnesota prohibits racial restrictions in real estate documents. In 1968, we have the Fair Housing Act that makes racially restrictive covenants illegal. And in 2019, Minnesota allows property owners to reject these covenants. Next slide. So the impacts of covenants are not just on wealth accumulation. They also impact demographics, on where people are, economic ability and stability, health, as well as infrastructure. Next slide. So linkage to modern day zoning. So many zoning provisions were fundamentally exclusive and remain in place today. And we are seeing them in Bloomington, which is why our planning division and our community development department are looking at our code. Minimum lot sizes, minimum unit sizes, minimum lot width requirements, and restrictions on the number of units on a lot. So in Bloomington, just providing a little bit of information, as you can see, the percent of the total population identified as non-white is focused more in around where the South Loop is and right outside of it. That's where it gets a little darker, and as it gets lighter, that is the concentration of people that do identify as white. But the percentage is specifically for those that identify as non-white. And then you move over to the right-hand side, the median household income for white alone, non-Hispanic, in Bloomington is around $79,000. But the gap is between white and black, where in Bloomington it's about $50,625 in median household income. And then the same is reflected in the percent of owner-occupied properties in Bloomington. 74% are white alone, non-Hispanic owned, and 14% are black owned. And this is from 2019 American Community Survey data. Next slide. So, as we look at how this has played out, in the search through the Just Deeds project by the city, 374 covenants intersect with 500 parcels in the city of Bloomington. Out of that number, 18 are city-owned, and 1 property is HRA-owned. Next slide. This is just an example to show you. As you can see, the HRA-owned property is a little bit further over there off of 86, between 86th and 87th. And then the rest of the city-owned are a little closer in the Bryant Park area. Next slide. So why focus on covenants today, since they're illegal? Well, the covenants intentionally divided our community by race and created segregation patterns. The restrictions depressed homeownership rates for Black Minnesotans, for others as well, but especially for Black Minnesotans, as that was the one common denominator in any deed, any racially restricted covenant, was that you could not sell to a Black person. It also included people based on religion and other ethnicities. Obstacles to property ownership made it hard for Black families to amass wealth, and awareness of historical injustice is the first step towards real change. So understanding these practices supports transformative policymaking. Next slide. So the City Council did pass a resolution, and the resolution disavows and condemns the past use of discriminatory covenants and prohibits future use. It identifies to identify and discharge any covenants on city-owned property, to do active outreach and education to impacted landowners, encouraging them to discharge covenants, and to join the Just Deeds Coalition, educate the community, identify existing discriminatory systems, policies, codes, and practices at the city level, dismantle those racist systems, practices, and policies. Next slide. So the Just Deeds initiative is an initiative that has multiple cities involved in it at this point. And Jamar Hardy, who was actually a real estate or a realtor, was instrumental in getting this initiative off the ground and launching it. And so it provides help for homeowners in cities free legal and title services, and access to online tools. And through this initiative, Hennepin County is also waiving fees for recording these discharges. As you can see, Bloomington has joined a multitude of other cities, peer cities, and is the first listed when it gets listed out on the webpage. Next slide. And so the next steps, the Human Rights and Planning Subcommittee, they have formed a subcommittee and they are working on a media campaign, and they will do community outreach, which is informal events, booths at farmers market, et cetera. And so now we're moving on to discharge of covenants. And so the city is taking on, with Just Deeds initiative, to direct outreach to homeowners with covenants. And the city will also be doing the discharge for homeowners through Just Deeds. Discharge for homeowners through Just Deeds, and then the city will also be discharging on properties owned by the city. And they approached the HRA and said, hey, you have one property that we would like you to have the racially restricted covenant discharged. So we are here this evening to just give you a little bit of background about Just Deeds and what the city is doing. The mission statement of Just Deeds is a little long, but it is attached to this status report. But we just wanted to let you know about it before we come back. We do have our general counsel looking into it and working on the proper steps to discharge it. And we would come back before the board with a request for approval of the resolution to discharge the racially restricted covenant on the city, one HRA-owned property. Any questions?
Thank you, Administrator Coleman. And I just want to comment, one of my questions was what are we doing to discharge this covenant on our property? And you just answered my question. Are there any other questions for Administrator Coleman? We're a quiet group tonight. Yes, Commissioner Olson.
Administrator Coleman, would you comment on the outreach to homeowners with covenants and so forth, and the community outreach? Is the community outreach aimed for people who could directly benefit by this in terms of home ownership and avoidance of covenant issues? I'm not sure if avoidance is the right word, or is it also for the general public to understand what this Just Rights initiative is?
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner. So it's both and. One, the covenants are absolutely illegal. They cannot be enforced. As the covenants were written, they had very strict stipulations around how the property could be used and who could live there and who could purchase it. And if you violated the covenant, the property could revert back to the original owner, and if they were passed, it could go to their heirs. That's 100% illegal, and it's been illegal since 1968. So this is more of, for the current homeowner, if they have a racially restricted covenant, to be aware that that existed and to allow them the opportunity to make a choice, an informed decision about what they want their name attached to. As for the general public, it is also bringing forward the historical information, but also the impacts that have been had for generations due to something that may seem small that's written, but it had a major impact on how our communities have been created and who has been allowed to live where and benefit. So it's both and to your question.
Thank you.
If I can do a follow too, please.
Yes.
Administrator Coleman, if you could give a sense of how, perhaps a variety of ways, these covenants are embedded in real estate transactions.
Sure. So one way they're embedded is, I would have to say, the difference between East and West Bloomington, and how the houses are built differently, how the schools may perform a little bit differently, how healthcare and access to parks and open space and how transit or freeways come through East Bloomington the way they do. That's just one aspect to how the covenants have played out. In particular, in Minneapolis and St. Paul, the covenants have played out the same way around transit. And so how the freeways have come through historically black neighborhoods, and those houses were taken with eminent domain, or how the homes are located near pollution, or how the schools are underperforming when there are higher concentrations of black and brown people living in an area, as well as the value of an area, which this gets a little bit deeper into real estate, but the value of an area is still dictated upon its proximity to whiteness. And so if there is an area that has a higher number of black and brown residents or rentals, the values may not be the same as an area that has more white people and more ownership.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Yes, Commissioner Hukim.
Thank you, Chair. I don't really have a question. I just have more of a comment. I just want to acknowledge and thank the Human Rights Commission and the subcommittee and everybody who's put work into this. I think it's very eye-opening to see that this is still in existence. I'd also like to say one thing that I learned when I was researching this too is on the Bloomington website, there's a great interactive map there where you can see if your home does have a covenant. So I looked at that the other night and found it very interesting how many near my area actually still do, and it's kind of eye-opening. So again, great work. I appreciate you bringing this to us, and I appreciate the work to get these, gone and out of our city. So thank you.
I echo that comment. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Comments or questions? Otherwise, I will move to our last item before adjournment, which is 6.3. This is the commissioner questions and answer opportunity. Does any of the commissioners have anything that they would like to ask or mention? All right, hearing that no one has anything for this evening, do I hear a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Thank you. Yes, it has been moved by Commissioner Beloga, seconded by Commissioner Thorson to adjourn the meeting. May we have the roll call vote, please?
Beloga.
Aye.
Hukim.
Aye.
Lewis.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Thorson. Motion passed 5-0 to adjourn the meeting at 6:39.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.